Most of you guys are well aware that I'm not a huge fan of Happymodel. They have stolen concepts from me in the past, and they make really low quality things typically, and they kind of flood the market with all this low quality stuff. But what good would I be as a reviewer if I couldn't at least try to put my opinions aside and discuss things as objectively as I feel that I possibly can? And I bring this up because I've said in the past that there's somebody at Happymodel that really knows what they're doing, because for the most part, their products tend to perform really nicely when they work. If they're not breaking or not failing or burning or something, they actually do perform really, really nicely. I don't know if this particular product went through that person's hands, because there's a number of issues with this thing that it's just hard to overlook. But let's start with what the whole point of this thing is. So the concept with this particular item is that it's both a Cinewhoop and a toothpick style thing. And so it comes with these prop guards, but the issue with these prop guards is that they're hard plastic and they're very light, but they're very fragile. I would not be surprised if you broke more than one if you fell from not even a foot high. And so I wouldn't recommend you to get this if you think that you're going to be using it as an indoor whoop of sorts, because this will definitely not hold up to any crashing at all. It's really just going to hold up to light bumps up against things or brush up against things, and that's really all it's going to be good for with ducks. Moving on, the motors that it comes with are actually surprisingly nice. And so in my original testing with the micro toothpick style kind of class, I found that 1103 motors with the 65mm 2.5 inch twin blade props tended to perform really nicely, and it was adequate for what I wanted to do with it. Now fast forward to today, I've tested a whole lot more and actually haven't updated anything in the 2.5 inch category, but I have found that 12 size motors are much more beneficial to a 2.5 inch or 65mm prop. Doesn't matter if it's a tri-blade or a twin blade or what you're doing with it. The 12 size motors are definitely an absolute improvement. And so what Happymodel has done is they've gone ahead and made a 1203 motor. I don't recommend 1202 motors just because they feel like they have no power, and so 1203 seems like a very reasonable size for the 2.5 inch category in 2S and 3S. And so this particular 1203 motor, it says it comes in 6200 kV, but Happymodel has this habit of making motors that at least say on them they're really high kV, but in actual use they don't feel like they're really high kV. These motors are okay. They're not fantastic. Happymodel doesn't really make anything fantastic. They're really okay to use. I don't know what the cost is. I don't even know if they're available yet, but I would say that these motors are actually pretty suitable for a 2.5 inch class of toothpick style-ish quad with a 3S battery and actually a tri-blade. I don't know why HQ or Gemfan hasn't made this prop in a tri-blade yet. I do have a couple of prototypes of the tri-blade version of their 65mm props, and on a 1202.5 motor, it actually performs really, really nicely. And that's the drivetrain that I would have pushed the toothpick class into if I was still working in that 2.5 inch category, but 3 inch is a much better size. And moving on to that, the weight of this quad is about 64 grams with no battery, and it's about 104 grams with the battery on board, which I would still recommend a 450 milliamp battery because that's what it comes with, and I would absolutely still recommend 450 milliamp 3S for these because the motors do draw a good amount of power, so you need the capacity. It's not going to be very good on a 300 milliamp 3S battery. And so if it was a 3-inch quad, that would really not be a problem. That'd actually be perfect. Even with the same exact everything set up, if they had pulled the arms out and made it a 3-inch quad, which it will not fit, the front specifically will not fit, as you can see there, it's very close to the canopy, it would have been actually a really great performer. As is, what they have done is they've actually traded disc loading properties for power. So you get more power out of these motors, which makes it more okay to have all this extra weight on board, but you do sacrifice the control of having a very good disc loading property. And so it sort of feels like the quad is a little bit out of control. You really don't have super fine control when you're flying this thing. It's not bad, and I can absolutely fly it smoothly and fly it well. It's just not as good as it could be, and that's number one because of the weight, and number two because of the weight distribution of the quad, having all this stuff in the front to back direction, the vertical direction, it does change the weight distribution. It makes it a little bit more difficult for the system to manage this weight. Now, moving on to the frame, well, this is an area where I'm sure I'm going to get a couple of responses or remarks that say that I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm looking at the carbon pattern on the surface of this frame. So if you look at the carbon patterning, the carbon fibers based on the top surface don't run directly down the arm. Now, a lot of people have pointed out that that is just a cosmetic layer, and I can't really judge what's going on inside the carbon based on just the top layer. I've been working in this industry for over 5 years now. I've been working with tons of carbon manufacturers and tons of products and broken so much carbon, and about 95 or more % of the time, I've found that you can absolutely predict what's happening with the carbon fibers inside just by looking at the top surface. And Happymodel is definitely not using some crazy quasi-isotropic or whatever layup. And when I hold this thing in my hands and I flex it, well, it's very easy to flex this thing. And even if I tried to put force on it, I bet this wouldn't even break. The quad would just fold in half, like the frame would fold. It wouldn't actually, I mean, look, it's already bent. I didn't even push that hard and the frame is already bent. So let's bend it back straight. So yeah, the frame hasn't been the greatest designed. Even if it was properly cut, I still don't think it would hold up or feel very nice because there's these giant gaping holes cut out of it for the motor wire plugs as well as a USB port, and that's why I kind of pushed for the creation of the toothpick style flight controller board, all-in-one board, so that you can easily solder your motor wires, because you do get an improvement in performance by soldering, and number two, so that you don't have that USB sticking out the bottom and you don't have to compromise the structure of the frame to do this sort of stuff. Now, moving on, the next thing this thing has on board is it has a Crazy Bee board in there, and the Crazy Bee board, the all-in-one board, has had quality control issues in the past. I haven't been following it very much in recent times because I just lost interest in something that just didn't work very well. The camera is the Cadex Baby Turtle, which I'm actually not opposed to the HD footage from it because it is so small and light. The issue I have with the Cadex Baby Turtle is that the FPV view is just awful. It's among the worst FPV views you'll find in the industry. It's too narrow, it's super blurry, you can't really see what's going on that great. The camera does do 16:9 and 4:3. I don't know why it comes in 16:9 as default. It should come in 4:3 default because 16:9 people with 4:3 goggles can't use 16:9, but people with 16:9 goggles can use 4:3 on their 16:9 screens and it looks totally fine. So 4:3 really should be the default if Cadex is watching, which I know they do watch because I've gotten them pretty angry. They're pretty upset at me for pointing out their quality control issues with the products that I've received. Thankfully, this particular one doesn't have quality control issues. It does work properly. Then moving on to the VTX, I believe it's a 200 milliwatt VTX, and it has what looks like a real antenna on board, which I don't know what the design of it is in there, but the video signal reception or signal coming out of this thing is actually really, really solid. That's a really great point as well. And they've also glued down the SMA plug on the board so that it doesn't fall off so easily, because Happymodel VTXs have a habit of just straight up burning out if the VTX falls off or if the antenna falls off for even a moment, and it's just totally dead. They also include the Tattoo 450 milliamp cells in the package, which I'm not a huge fan of. I actually like the GMB cells much more. I found that the Tattoo cells and the China Hobby line, the orange ones, they don't really perform very well, and they weigh more than the GMB cells, basically. The GMB cells are some of the best small cell batteries that I've used in the industry. That's why I work with them exclusively at this point. I haven't really tested a whole bunch of more recent batteries with other companies, but so far I do know that these small cell Tattoo cells are kind of hit or miss. Some of the packs work well, others have really bad IR and just don't perform nearly as well as they should. So all in all, this thing is, my issues with it are, number one, the frame is awful. Number two, Happymodel quality is questionable. Number three, the Cadex Baby Turtle is not, in my opinion, that great. And number four, the ducts that it comes with are essentially useless. Otherwise, the flight performance is not bad. It trades disc loading properties, control and handling, for a little bit more power that can help manage the weight a little bit more. and the motors are actually the best part of this quad. So the fact that they made these 1203 motors is really the best part of this quad, and I don't know if they came up with that idea themselves, or they've just been watching my channel and then came across the idea, or they've been reading other people across YouTube or across Facebook and came up with this idea. But yeah, do with it what you will. I hope that was as objective as a review of this product as I could possibly give. Take care. Oh, well, the other thing is that it has Crossfire on board, but they didn't do anything with the antenna, but that really doesn't matter. Take care and floss your teeth. Bye.